Hello, welcome to Time of Death. This is episode 14. And if you're new here, I'm Ris,
And I'm Dee.
and we are two nurses with psychiatric and emergency background. I guess medical backgrounds would be more accurate.
You know what? At the end of the day, we're two nurses on this podcast
Just
talking,
trying to make it.
just trying to talk our shit.
Fair warning. I just want to give a warning to our listeners. There is some delicate matter that is going to be discussed, including sexual assault. So if you are not in the right headspace for this today, then we'll just see you next episode. What inspired me for this story today is a documentary that can be watched on Netflix. It's called Our Father. It's gained quite a bit of traction. I think it came out last year in 2022. So our story centered around Jacoba is her name. She grew up asking her mom if she was adopted. She always just had a hunch that she didn't really fit in with the rest of her family in terms of they all had like olive toned skin, dark eyes, and she was very fair, blonde hair, blue eyes.
I know exactly why Riss chose this because for years, Riss was convinced that she was adopted and that
True.
we were not really sisters and our brother was really not her brother and that her real parents were going to come and whisk her away from our house.
I had like fairy tale brain when I was little.
You wanted Ariel and Prince Eric to be your parents so
Oh, what I
badly.
would have given. So after asking her mom for most of her childhood if she was adopted,
Mhm.
at 10 years old, she found out that she was conceived using donor sperm. So in 1979, her parents, her mom and dad, were unable to have kids, so they decided to pursue artificial insemination. And the two of them matched with a donor who looked like Jacoba's father, and they were patients of Dr. Cline, Dr. Donald Cline. So a little bit here about Klein because our story has everything to do with this guy. In 1963, Klein was driving and he hit a little girl because she darted like in between traffic, in between two cars, and he hit her. She passed away, unfortunately. So this was a very traumatizing moment for him. And it really initiated a period of him just being very religious and very faith oriented. So he was Christian. He was married with 4 children. Him and his wife taught Sunday school, and they also did marriage counseling as well. He had a fertility clinic in Indianapolis. So he had Christian sayings, like Bible verses, all over his office. He really had given some other people who weren't of the same faith or just maybe didn't have as rigid beliefs as he did, the idea that he was condemning their faith. And he really was giving the vibe that if you're not Christian, then what are you doing? So a member of the church that he belonged to said that the elders governed their church body, and Klein was one of the elders. And the people that went to his church would go to Klein's house for baptisms. So he would hold baptisms, and there was like 50 to 100 people there. And he was just very prominent in his community and especially his church. He was like the best known infertility doctor in Indianapolis. He was the go-to doctor for couples who were struggling with conceiving. Jan was a nurse that worked there for 13 years. She described him as very formal. He was like a stern father figure.
When was this, if you don't mind?
This is all before 1985.
Okay.
Before 1985, they would use live sperm for artificial insemination.
What?
Yeah, so I'll get into that. But so Jan says he's very self assured, and she said that what had happened with this case was extremely shocking to her. It was very out of his baseline. Dr. Robert Clover, a fellow doctor with him at the clinic, and he had no idea either. Shireen and Mark Farber were friends of Donald Klein. Both Don and Mark were stationed at Grissom Air Force Base, and they described him as being arrogant, but he was bright. He just thought he knew better about everything. Shireen actually has her PhD in neurobiology. and is an occupational therapist. She treated preemies for a
Oh,
living, and she said that he acted like he knew more about babies and children than she did, and clearly he does not. So, like I said, fresh sperm was used for artificial insemination before 1985. Dan, the nurse, recalled that a notebook was used for parents to choose the donor out of. And actually, interestingly, the sperm was donated by medical residents.
oh, shoot. For
So
extra cash.
yeah, so the clinic was right across the street from the hospital. So Jan would scurry over to the hospital, meet with the resident who was donating the sperm, so the resident slash donor, retrieve the sperm, put it in her bra so it would
Oh
because it
my
has to
god.
be like body temp
But they
to be
had to
viable.
so they literally their solution was to keep it at a certain temp for her to stick it in her bra.
Yeah, did what she had to do. So Jan sticks that thing in her bra, runs back across the street to the clinic, and they get that sample in their patients.
Well, there are some really cute residents, so it's not the worst idea
I guess
ever.
not. I guess not.
I can think of a few. I won't shout them out though. I don't wanna embarrass them.
Yeah, it's fine. That's fine. So each resident slash donor, they usually only donated like 3 times max. So 3 times they donated their sperm and then they were out of it. Okay. Because they didn't want too many people in the same geographic area.
That
So,
makes
like,
sense.
you don't want people dating who may be related.
Yeah.
So they would really try to just limit 3 times. All right, you're out. Like, we're good. Moving on to the next resident. So in 1999, Jacoba was 19 years old at this point. But she wasn't as curious about finding the donor, who was her
Mhm.
father, as much as she was about having siblings. So she really was longing for sibling
Connection.
relationships and the bond that she would have had with a sibling. There was no commercial DNA testing at this time. So she called Cline's office. He was still practicing. She asked for information on the donor so that she could find her siblings. And she wanted either her mom's medical record or the donor's phone number or just anything really, any information he could give. And he was very straightforward, very cut to the chase. He's just said, "Your mom's records were destroyed and good luck, Jacoba." Jacoba was just wondering for years after that until 2014 when 23andMe started coming around and started really gaining popularity. So Jacoba was 35 years old at this point, and here she's still thinking because she knew that I don't know who she found out from. I think she found out from her mother that each donor donated like max 3 times. So she was thinking, okay, maybe I have one or two siblings. Like that's what I'm expecting. Like I
Right.
just want to find them. So she's still very curious. So she in fall 2014 gets the results of her 23andMe test. And she saw something interesting in the report. She saw that she was related to 7 siblings.
Oh boy.
So she was really excited at first. And then she was like, wait, this does not seem right. Like, this donor was supposed to donate 3 times max. Like,
Mm.
how can I have 7 siblings on here?
He could have had kids, like, of his own accord.
That's true. No, that's a good point, actually. She reached out to the siblings because there is on 23andMe like an option for you to talk to relatives.
Oh, wow.
And Koba and her half siblings started all connecting and they got really curious and they wanted to find the donor because they're like,
Uh,
this is strange. So they started having like weekly family calls or family meetings
oh, wow.
and started working together to develop a family tree. And Jacoba remembered, like, jokes between them about Dr. Cline being their father.
Oh my
Like, what if he was our dad? And it's like,
Eh,
oh, like, they
gross.
didn't realize the seriousness of this at first. Like, they
Right.
thought maybe it was just a one-off. So, while they were all searching, they all matched with the same woman, and her name was Sylvia, and it showed her as a second cousin on 23andMe. And
What does that even mean, second cousin?
To be honest, I don't know. I know there's second cousin, third cousin, like cousin twice removed. Like that stuff I don't understand, so
I
I
don't
just
either.
avoid it. But somehow she was related. Mm.
I just avoid it,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. So her name was Sylvia, and Sylvia and Jacoba started talking, the siblings started talking, and they asked for a list of surnames that was in her family. Sylvia cited a list, and one of the names on the list was Swinford. And Jacoba's like a mastermind, like detective. Like I know you're fascinated with Sherlock Holmes,
It's
and
true.
she's like a Sherlock Holmes. This girl, undying passion to find the answers. So Jacoba found out that is Donald Cline's mother's maiden name,
Oh,
and she asked Sylvia if there was any Clines in her family. And Sylvia's like, "Oh my god, yeah, I forgot. I have a cousin named Don Cline. He's actually a doctor." And Jacoba was shocked, obviously, and it just solidified the strange joke that they had jokingly said together. Wait a sec,
that's
this
disgusting.
is like real life. Jacoba was obviously in a state of shock. She was thinking like, "Why? How long? Like, how many other siblings do I have out there?" Jacoba ended up filing a complaint with the Attorney General Department of Indiana. And of course, they send back the obligatory letter that, "Oh, we received your complaint and we are looking into it. We will be in contact with you."
AKA, we are not gonna do a thing.
Not a thing they do. She never heard back from them. So Jacoba ended up going on and reaching out to news outlets. She went to all kinds of news outlets, nationwide news.
I like her.
Everyone that she can get in touch with, she tried to. Wasn't really getting any traction. So she, guess, was watching the news one night and saw on Fox 59, there's a reporter named Angela Ganote.
Mm.
And she saw Angela and thought, I never reached out to her. And she's a little tiger too. I'm gonna
Mhm.
reach out to her.
I love
So
it.
she did. In February 2015, Angela got a message from Jacoba, and Jacoba explained Klein is inseminating his patients. And Angela's like, "Oh my God, I need to look into this." And she bursts into the news director's room and says, "Listen to this." And from there, her investigation began. So these two investigations are occurring together. And Angela reaches out to Klein, and Klein immediately denies paternity. He says, "I am not the father. I only used resident sperm." And Angela says, "Okay, if you only use resident sperm, then you surely wouldn't mind taking a DNA test." And Donald says, "No, I will not be doing that," and hung up the phone. So he also warned Angela that he was protected by HIPAA, and Angela really got the feeling that he was warning her, like, "You don't want to go down this road." So at this point, Jacoba just really needed a DNA test
Mm.
to prove paternity, and the state really was not in any hurry to help. So Jacoba is still working with her half siblings that she met through 23andMe. And one of the half siblings messaged all of Klein's children and all of his grandchildren who were over the age of 18 and explained what was going on and asked if anyone in the family had ever donated sperm ever. And a week or two goes by, and Klein's son, Doug, who's his son with his wife, messages Jacoba. And Doug, his sister Donna, and Jacoba all meet at Jacoba's church. Jacoba's like, "I don't know what to expect. Like, I want to meet somewhere where I'm comfortable." So they meet at her church, and Doug tells Jacoba that Klein admitted that he was the father of some of his patients' children, but Doug said he only used it when he couldn't get any donor sperm. And he told
Ah,
Doug that there were no more than 10 kids that he fathered. We determined that was blush. So,
dude, this is just one long Maury show.
oh, it gets crazy. So after their meeting, Doug calls and I think he feels bad.
Yeah.
You don't know your father impregnated all his patients. Like you,
Imagine his wife.
yeah. Doug messages Jacoba and he offers to help her. And Jacoba said, "You know what will help me is a meeting with Cline." So Doug spoke with Cline, and Cline agreed.
Oh,
And which is shocked at. I think maybe
yeah.
he probably was pressured by Doug to do it, which is a
Wow.
good thing. Jacoba and 5 of her half siblings meet with Cline. So Cline comes in to the restaurant where they meet at. I think it was a restaurant. He comes in and they said he's pretty emotionless. And they also see a gun on his hip, like the outline of a gun on his hip. And they took that as an intimidating gesture.
Yeah.
He sits down and he introduces himself and he goes around the table and asks each of his children for their name, age, and their profession. And Jacoba felt like he was ranking them, like, in their success. And they end up asking Klein about his medical history because 'cause we'll get into this, but they all have similar health issues going on, and they wanna know what they should be concerned with. What do you have a history of? Like, you share half our DNA, like, I wanna know what we need to look out
What's up?
for.
Yeah.
And he said, "You don't have anything to worry about." And then he brought scripture, and this is important. He brought scripture, Jeremiah 1:5, and he said, "Jacoba, this is for you." And Jacoba was not having it and told him to put it away. She's very religious as well.
Mm.
And she said, "You're not going to use your faith against me. Like, I'm not here for that." Jeremiah 1:5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you, and I ordained you a prophet to the nations."
Oh
So
my god.
we'll get more deeply into this, but it just sets the tone for this whole thing. And there's some theories later on about why he did
Mhm.
that. That is very involved around. So while they're all together, still one sibling asked why he used his own sperm. And Klein says, "Your mom's wanted kids so badly, and I just really wanted to help make that happen."
Yeah, that's a bunch of
Mhm.
crap.
And this time reassures them and says, "You know what? There's no more than 15
It's going
kids."
up.
So time went on. Siblings were continuing to be discovered. Angela's investigation is still going on as well.
Yeah.
And Don is starting to get scared and he calls Jacoba.
Don is which who?
Klein, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Don is Klein. So
okay.
Klein calls Jacoba and says, "I'm having a real problem. They are demanding that I meet with them, and they're trying to improve their ratings. If this comes out, like, my marriage with my wife is gonna be over."
It's
And
already it
Jacoba's like, "I'm sorry, but that's not my problem."
no.
And so he clearly does not want his indiscretions public. He wants Jacoba to stop working with Angela, and Jacoba just said this fueled her fire, which is good. So she contacted the Attorney General office, who she still hasn't heard from, and of course, they don't answer again. So she decided, "I'm just gonna go full force and do my own research."
Mhm.
So she does that. So she starts researching papers, articles, blogs, anything she can get her hands on that dealt with Dr. Klein. I'm just gonna get into some of the other siblings that came forward from
Mhm.
all this, and then we'll head back to the investigation component. So Julie Harmon is her name. And she was watching the news with her husband one night and she saw Jacoba on the TV. And her husband was like, "You know what? She kinda looks like you." And then she talked to her mom, Diana, and Diana was like, "Yeah, we saw Dr. Klein, but I used your father's sperm.
Oh
I used
no.
your dad's sperm. So this doesn't apply to you. You don't need to get tested." They use live sperm insemination. And Diana carried her husband's sperm to the office because it needs to get there within an hour, and she was inseminated with what she thought was her husband's sperm.
Oh.
It was successful, and she gave birth to a healthy baby to Julie, and she even took Julie into Dr. Klein's office to show her to him later on. So Julie Her mom tried to reassure her, but Julie just really had a feeling in her gut that something was wrong, and so she reached out to Jacoba, and so Jacoba said, "Just DNA test. Like, I did 23andMe, just take a
Yeah.
23andMe test, but I really don't think it is applicable to you. Like, all my other half siblings are from donor sperm. Like, your dad provided the sperm. So, Julie took the 23andMe test,
Popped right up.
and she sees Jacoba's name. And Julie obviously was devastated, just like everyone else in this case. And Diana was devastated as well. And she had to tell Julie's father, "Do you remember when we went to Dr. Kline's office and you provided your sperm? The baby isn't yours. Dr. Kline used his own sperm."
That's a different kind of betrayal, though.
Yeah.
Like, you're really thinking it doesn't matter. That it does matter, but he's still her dad.
Yeah.
But she thought it was her. That's such a
I
violation.
know. I know. And it's just so much emotion from everyone, and, like, it impacts everyone involved in this case. So Julie's dad starts crying after Diana tells him that, and his words were, "He's taken everything away from me." And
Oh,
so it's just devastating. Another sibling, his name is Matt White. Liz White is his mom. She was struggling with infertility, and she started seeing Dr. Klein for artificial insemination. And she said that Klein was always the only one in the office. Like,
mm,
he would greet her, bring her to the room, like she never saw anyone but Dr. Klein. And she like was reflecting on her time there, and she said just the thought of like him bringing her to a room, and then her undressing, getting in her gown, and then she thinks he leaves, masturbates, and then returns with his sperm and injects his sperm into her. And she's just is completely elated and disgusted. She'd been going to him for 15 times, to
wow.
Dr. Klein, for these treatments, and she thought she had altitude sickness, or maybe she just ate something weird, or she was late for her period, but she got pregnant and gave birth to Matt. And when she first found out, her first words were, "I was raped 15 times and I didn't even know it."
I agree.
Yep, it is. It's sexual assault. So, another sibling, her name is Heather Wook. She was given a DNA test by her husband as a present. And so she took it, and she got messages from Julie and Jacoba. So, Julie is another sibling along with Jacoba. And they said, "I think we are related." And Heather took some time to process it and said, "I just need some time to think about this, and then I'll get back to you," because it really wasn't the results, obviously, that she was looking for, or anyone was looking
Right.
for. So she took some time. A few months later, she reached back out to them, found out the truth, and Heather had a identity crisis, she said, and just was saying how Dr. Klein told her parents, like, it's better for her not to know the donor, like, just let it lie, and she just was in complete shock. Another sibling, Lisa Shepard Stidham, she asked for a DNA test for Christmas, and so she got her 23andMe, and she popped up on Julie's new family member. And Julie actually already knew Lisa.
Wow.
Like, most of the siblings live in, like, 25-mile radius, and some of them live, like, within minutes to Dr. Klein's house.
I'm not trying to be gross, but people usually date within a certain vicinity of where they live. I hope that none of them found out that they were dating a sibling.
I didn't hear any stories of that, but that's a thought that crosses every single one of their minds,
Yeah.
and, like, even I forget which sibling it was that was saying how, like, she has to explain to her daughter that, like, "You need to be very careful who you're dating because we don't know if we're related to them. You need to know who you're dating."
I would move. I
Yeah.
would not wanna be even, like, that's traumatic.
It is traumatic. It is an identity crisis.
Yeah.
Like I said, Julie recognized Lisa, and I guess Lisa's husband coached Julie's daughter for, I think, some kind of sport. I don't know which one. and then their kids had been playing sports together as well, so they were familiar with each other. And Julie reached out to Lisa and said, "Do you know about Dr. Cline? Like, he's our father." And Lisa was like, "What?" She was obviously shocked.
Aw.
So Lisa calls her mom. She asks if there were any issues with her being conceived, and she wasn't aware of anything. And her mom says, "Your dad had some trouble, like he had low sperm count."
Oh my god.
And so they went twice to visit Klein, and both times Lisa's dad provided the sperm sample. So obviously they always believed that Lisa was her father's.
There's no reason to question that.
Yeah. And so back to the investigation. Angela emails Klein stating that they are moving forward with the story, and she offered him the chance and said, "If you want to come clean, this is your time to come clean." So Klein surprisingly agrees with the stipulation that there be no video or audio recording. Angela said, "Do you want to come to the news station?" He said no. And so she said, "All right, let's go to this restaurant like nearby the news station," because she wanted to be close by. She didn't want to be public. And the news station was hesitant for her to go alone. They wanted like security to go with her
Yeah.
because they were getting really concerned that he was getting desperate, which is very fair. He was getting desperate. And Jacoba also told her he carries a gun. Like when I saw him, he had a gun on his hip. So he is telling Jacoba he's being forced to meet with Angela. He doesn't want to come clean about everything. He just wants to sweep it under the rug like he's
Mhm.
been doing. So Angela and Klein get to the restaurant, and he asks Angela if guns are allowed in the restaurant. And Angela sees a gun poking out underneath his sweater, and they sit down. And Angela said like, one of the first things he says is that he knows where she lives and where she's from very early on. And the meeting was for about an hour. And basically, the entire meeting was him just begging Angela to stop the investigation. "It's going to ruin my marriage. It's going to mess up my standing in church. Like, you don't want to go down this route." So Angela says, "I'm sorry, this is not up to you. I need to give justice to these
Yeah.
people that you've completely betrayed and violated." Jacoba recalls, and the other siblings as well, recall strange things starting to happen. Jacoba said one morning she went out to her car and all the lug nuts were missing from her car tires. And Julie was hacked. Her Google Drive, where she kept content related to Klein, was wiped.
Wow.
And all her emails about Klein were gone. They were gone. Heather, another sibling, was getting harassing phone calls. They're asking if she wanted to buy a cemetery plot, like very
Threat.
threatening. So Jacoba and Klein have phone calls. Like once in a while, he will call her and he's continuing to push her to stop, lay off, don't go down this road. The world doesn't need to know, he says. Okay.
What about your freaking at that point, your kids? Give your kids that freaking closure. If you're gonna you will destroyed your marriage the minute that you did this. You were not a Christian, and if it's such an issue for your church to find out, you shouldn't have freaking done it.
Yep, exactly. You didn't want anyone to know. Why'd
Why
you do
do it?
it? Yeah, that's the question. Everyone just wants an answer. Why did you do it?
Honestly, to me, it sounds like he had a weird kink.
There is a definitely a sexual component. Like he denied a sexual component,
Oh, I'm
but you're in another room while your patient is half naked, legs up, waiting to be inseminated, and you're in another room masturbating. Like you obviously need to be aroused. And then immediately after your arousal, after he's ejaculated, he goes back to the patient and immediately injects the sperm. Like you're going to tell me there's not.
the fact that she's there specifically to get inseminated really fueled that twisted, dark and twisted
Yeah, so
logic.
there's something going on.
Oh,
Another sibling, Jason Hyatt, He just something fell off his whole life. Kind of like Jacoba, he had blonde hair and blue eyes. The rest of his family all had dark hair, dark eyes. So he took an ancestry test and he said one of his friends said, "Oh, no, you might get a few hits." And he got 3,000 hits on his report.
What?
So Jacoba called him and says, "I'm your sister." And she tells him the story.
She got it down
And
to a science.
yep, Jacoba and Jason are very close. They're very have a very close relationship. So at this point, Jacoba receives an email from someone at Attorney General. And when she got the email, she went through and looked at all the people involved in the emails. And one of the emails, one person from the state had a quiverful email address. So
Isn't that the name of his mom's
no,
maiden
that's
name?
Swinford.
Oh.
So Jacoba, she researched what quiverful was, and boy, did she find some things out. So quiverful is like a cult, basically. They have the aim to have as many kids as possible, and basically a quiver full of arrows, like a quiver full of children to, like, go out in the world, like, send children out like arrows to be like
Weapon.
messengers for God. And these kids are raised to seek positions of power, go into politics, strive to change the world, spread their message and ingrain it in society. You know what I mean? So that made me immediately think when he was asking all of his kids' profession at the
Yeah,
table
he
when they
wanted
met,
yeah.
like he wanted to see where can I stretch my fingers. And actually, Jeremiah 1:5, that same verse that he mentioned to Jacoba, is frequently used in quiverful beliefs. So, quiverful, one component is that they view women as breeders. There's also an interesting theory here that they have a component that they want to produce more people of the white race, because they're fearful that other races are taking over and they just really want to progress the white race forward.
It's like the Aryan.
Yeah. So Jacoba said, "Wait a sec. We're all white babies. Like, literally, all the babies from this are white."
And you know what? He must have had some strong freaking genes for
Mhm.
them all to come from to look different than their family members,
That's
if
true.
that
They
makes
do look
sense.
very similar. They're all, for the most part, most of them have blonde hair and blue eyes. And Jacoba said we look like an Aryan clan. Jacoba was just like, wait, were all of our moms like used to produce us? Is he just trying to spread his seed everywhere he can, like to progress this agenda? And so a year goes by, Attorney General is not doing anything. And Angela, the news reporter, has been asking the attorney general for an interview since 2015, so this is, I think, about a year later. And Angela is fed up. She reaches out to Marion County prosecutor asking, like, "Is anyone gonna ever do anything? This is just so frustrating." And a spokesperson for the office apologized and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. We missed it. Can you, like, fill us in?" And Angela fills them in, writes them a paragraph explaining everything, even sent them a copy of, because they had aired a story at this point on Dr. Cline. I don't think they couldn't name him, like, in the aired program,
Mhm.
because they didn't get that test yet. They didn't never got the DNA test yet.
It could have been just one person that was not Doctor.
Angela sends them the story. So Tim Delaney, he's the former prosecutor for Marion County. Him and the siblings talk together. And Tim says, "I understand this is a violation. This is rape. Like, I understand, but it's legally not a sexual violation.
How?
It's legally not battery." And Jacoba gets pissed.
Mm.
And Jacoba said, "If I spit on you right now, is that battery?" And Tim said, "Yes, it would be battery." But Jacoba's like, "Our moms did not consent. Like, How is that not rape? How is that not battery? Like, they did not ask to be inseminated with his sperm.
That's no informed consent, you're right.
Jody Madeira is a law professor at Indiana State, and she brings up the point that there's a provision that rape can include conduct that the victim isn't aware is sexual, but the perpetrator knows it's sexual.
Yep.
So the fact he was masturbating close by the patient who was half naked, whose knees were just apart on the stretcher, like, she's like, where is that line made, like, between sexual and clinical for this case? Because
Mhm.
obviously there's some, like, residual arousal after you've just masturbated and ejaculated, and then you immediately go into the patient's room. Like, where is the line? How can
Right.
you say? And Tim is just saying how, like, juries in Indiana wouldn't buy into that idea of rape by deception theory. Like, she consented to being inseminated, like, the mothers consented to insemination. They didn't consent to being inseminated by him, but they consented to the action of being inseminated by sperm, by
Very
their significant other sperm or the donor sperm, you know what
right.
I mean? And all the moms, it's just so heartbreaking to see these moms too, like the daughters and sons and the moms. It's just heartbreaking because they've been sexually assaulted
Absolutely.
and they all feel so violated. There's no consent. And Jacoba's mom, for one, her name is Donna. She's like, I would have refused. If he had offered me his sperm, oh, I would have flat out refused.
Yeah.
Like, how
So
can
should
this
be.
not be considered sexual
It
assault?
absolutely should be.
So
It's a huge violation
it's
of
a huge
trust.
violation of trust. It is. Make
Non-malfeasance, do no harm.
exactly. So here's where it gets good. Well, not good, but at least they progress a little. Cline told Angela that he sent the Attorney General office a letter in which he said he was not the father. And he lied to Angela too, but he sent Attorney General a letter. And this set off a light in Angela's head and Timothy's head, the prosecutor, the former prosecutor. And they're like, wait, we can use this. This is obstruction of justice.
Oh,
Count one was on or about January 21st, 2015, where he made and slash or presented a false document. And then second count on it or about January 23rd, where he made and or presented a false document. So here's where they set off the investigation and they finally get that DNA sample from Cline. So law enforcement goes to Cline's house. Cline was sick with pneumonia, and law enforcement takes out their warrant for DNA, and Cline complied, and they got their DNA sample. They swabbed his mouth and got their DNA sample. And of course, the results show, you ready for this? You're going to be shocked. 99.9997% likelihood that he was Jacoba's father.
however, that 0.1111113,
Oh my God.
dude.
I know, seriously. Now they have the DNA test proving that Cline is indeed Jacoba's father, along with all of her half siblings. And so now they can prove not that he had done everything he did back in the 70s and 80s, the mothers in these families, and children in the families, but they can prove that he did obstruct justice when he lied on the documents he sent to attorney generals. So Cline pleads guilty to both counts of obstruction of justice, and Jacoba and some of her other siblings went to the hearing. And one of the siblings, Heather, said he looked really old and weak, and she said it's an act to try and gain sympathy. Like, she thought it was an act
Mhm.
to gain sympathy from the judge. So Jacoba actually was able to give a statement. But the thing is here, they can only testify about relevant information. Like, you can only give relevant impact. That's the thing with, like, victim statements is you can only testify about what they're being tried for. So this is not about everything that's happened to them. This is just about him lying on paperwork, basically. So Jacoba just really was not having that, and she did say her 2 cents. And the defense, so Cl Cline's team submits letters from former patients, from family members, from church members, and they're really just asking for leniency, and they're contesting to Cline's character, like, he's such a good guy,
Mm.
and the siblings really said the judge seemed very sympathetic to him,
What?
and ultimately, he was given no jail time. He's labeled a level 6 felon, and he was fined $500. So, Jacoba just says, "This was such a slap in the face." And 2 years has gone by at this point. There's no justice here. This is always just gonna continue, and we are never gonna get the justice that we need. We're never gonna find out the reason. Like, he's never gonna be, held responsible for anything he's done. Another sibling, her name is Carrie Foster. Her parents wanted a healthy baby. They weren't, like, picky about the donor, they just wanted a healthy baby, and so they went to Doctor Cline, and Carrie was born. Carrie has health issues along with most of the siblings. A lot of them have autoimmune diseases.
Mm.
One of the siblings has a blood clotting disorder. They've got GI issues. Mark, who, if you recall, it was his friend, they worked on the Air Force Base. He said he had rheumatoid arthritis and he got treated for it. And if you don't know, rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disorder. So all the siblings are like, "He has an autoimmune disorder. Nobody else in my family has been having all these issues that have been going on. This is a way to explain it, like, we all have similar issues." 30% of donors don't make it past the questionnaire due to either their personal history or family history. They get to that point and then don't qualify, and Klein would not have qualified. All these moms just wanted healthy babies.
Mm.
They just wanted healthy babies. Another sibling, Allison Kramer, she has a genetic disorder, and so do her kids. And so she took a 23andMe test because of that. She had half siblings listed, and she assumed it was a mistake. Her parents were Shireen and Mark. Those are Klein's friends from the same Mark
Wow.
that lived on the Air
The Air
Force
Force.
Base. So Allison was like, "I was not aware, like, of any treatments that were done for my parents when they were trying to conceive me." Allison is actually a twin, so that she wasn't aware. She knew that they took some fertility medications during their
Right.
pregnancy, but that's it. But Shireen had been a patient of Dawn's, not only a friend of Dawn's, but a patient of Dawn's. So Jacoba messaged Allison and was like, "I'm sure you're very confused by the results of your tests. Like, just reach out and I can, like, help to get bridge some gaps for you. Like, I have some answers I think you would wanna hear. I know it's so shocking and confusing." And some time passes, and in December 2019, Dr. Phil actually did a show about Dr. Klein, and Jacoba and her other siblings walk out onto the stage, and Allison opens up 23andMe and sees all of the same siblings on her report. And of course, her heart just fell. And they had just her and her family had no idea that he could have, no one could, but they had no idea that he could have been capable of this. And there's like photos of Klein coming over to their house because they were all friends. They were all
Right.
familiar with each other, of them coming over to her house and like him holding the baby and just
Wow,
crazy.
that's crushing. That's crushing.
And what makes it worse is that Klein was actually Allison's fertility doctor as well, and he did her routine gynecological care as
His
well.
daughter.
Oh my how violating. So, that's where we're at now. N 94 siblings
Mhm.
when the documentary aired. There's 94 of them, so far because 'cause they're
That
always
only
gonna
the
be
one
popping up.
the only ones that have taken the test.
Yeah. Cline, of course, denied all sexual component. All records of his patients have been destroyed. It's 2018. Legislation was passed in Indiana that made illicit donor insemination illegal, but there's no federal law at this point. And 23andMe has led to this is crazy too. 23andMe has helped with the discovery that 44 additional doctors have been found to have used their sperm to impregnate their patients, which just
Wow.
blows my freaking mind. So, yeah, this is just an insane case, and it must be so disheartening and just sh completely shocking for all these families.
I can't imagine how difficult what a difficult position that must have been for his children. I especially feel really bad for Allison.
Oh, yeah.
That's, like, freaking crazy.
You know what? I got so scared when I was watching this documentary. I was like, "Please don't tell me he uses his own sperm
On
for
his
her
daughter.
fertility treatments." I almost had a heart attack. I was like, "Oh
I
my
would've
god."
I wouldn't honestly, that's something that, like, that would cause a psychotic break.
I agree.
I wanna give a shout out to one of our most dedicated viewers. He quotes episodes, catchphrases at work all the time. I wanna shout out Joe because I know that you'll hear this, so I'm not gonna tell you that I'm shouting you out.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, I think that's about it. I just wanna also add Jacoba and all these siblings, to be honest.
Jacoba's the
Uh,
freaking bomb.
she poor thing been through this horrific ordeal, and she's just plugging along, fighting for herself and all her siblings and all the
Mm,
families that have been
yeah,
impacted by this.
for justice.
And kudos to Angela because she's the only one that really listened.
And then you know what? That's such a violation, and I really don't think that it was taken as seriously as it should have
No,
been.
it wasn't.
His
It's still
license should have
not.
been revoked,
Still
all
not.
kinds he should not be Dr. Klein anymore, he should just be Donald.
D, you wanna call it?
Yes, the time is 1945. Thank you all for listening. We are calling the time of death for this episode. Have a great night, everyone. Except you, Dr. Klein.
Bye.
Just call him Donald.